Dr. Hyunwoo pressed his face closer to the diving craft's thick glass window, watching the depth meter climb higher and higher. The numbers made his stomach twist with nervousness. They were going deeper into this alien ocean than any Corvani had ever gone before. The water outside was so black it felt like diving into empty space itself. "How much deeper can this trench go?" he muttered, adjusting the controls on his bioluminescent scanner. The device cast strange blue and green lights into the crushing darkness around their small submarine. Every few seconds the lights would catch something floating past, maybe a piece of metal, maybe some kind of sea creature they'd never seen before. Jimin sat at the navigation console beside him, her 4 eyes focused on the sonar screen. Her long, slender fingers danced across the controls as she fine-tuned the scanning equipment. "The readings are getting weird down here," she said, her voice carrying a mix of excitement and worry. "There's something big interfering with our instruments." Captain Sujin's voice crackled through the communication system from her position at the rear of the craft. "Surface control, this is Deep Explorer 1. We're at maximum safe depth and continuing descent. All systems are green." She paused, then added quietly to her crew, "Keep your eyes open down there. This place gives me a bad feeling." The Corvani had been exploring this abandoned world for 3 full cycles now. Their home planet's scientists had detected the dead world from across the galaxy, and the archaeological expedition had been sent to study what appeared to be the remains of a long-dead civilization. Everything they'd found so far suggested that whoever had lived here was primitive. Basic tools, simple buildings, nothing that seemed advanced or threatening. But this ocean was different. The water itself felt wrong somehow, like it was hiding secrets that were never meant to be found. "Contact!" Jimin suddenly shouted, making both her companions jump. "Bearing 270, distance approximately 500 meters. It's massive. The sonar is showing something nearly 2 kilometers in length." Hyunwoo felt his heart skip a beat. 2 kilometers. That was bigger than their entire research ship waiting on the surface. "Are you sure those readings are correct? Maybe it's just the ocean floor playing tricks on our equipment." "No, this is definitely artificial," Jimin replied, her voice tight with excitement. "The shape is too regular, too purposeful. It's been buried under centuries of sediment, but it's definitely a constructed object." Captain Sujin moved forward to look over their shoulders at the sonar display. The image showed a long, angular shape buried beneath layers and layers of ocean floor sediment. It looked like a massive building had somehow ended up at the bottom of the deepest part of the ocean. "This changes our entire understanding of this civilization," Sujin said slowly. "If they could build something this large, they weren't as primitive as we thought." The diving craft moved slowly through the water toward the mysterious object. As they got closer, Hyunwoo activated the excavation drones, small robotic devices that could carefully remove sediment without damaging whatever lay beneath. The process was slow and delicate, like brushing dust off an ancient artifact. Hour by hour, the drones worked to clear away the accumulated ocean floor material. The 3 Corvani watched in growing amazement as the shape became clearer. It wasn't just large, it was impossibly pristine. While everything else they'd found on this world was rusted and broken down by age, this object looked like it had been built yesterday. When the sediment clouds finally cleared, what they saw made all 3 of them fall silent with shock. The vessel was absolutely pristine, its angular hull gleaming with an almost mirror-like finish that seemed to push the water away from its surface. The metal reflected their light so perfectly that it almost hurt to look at directly. Strange markings covered every surface, symbols that looked both beautiful and somehow dangerous at the same time. "Those symbols," Jimin whispered, "they're not like anything we've found before. They're too organized, too complex. This is advanced writing, not the simple scratches we've been cataloging." Hyunwoo guided their craft closer to what appeared to be the front of the massive vessel. His translation computer was working frantically to decode the strange symbols, running them through every language database they carried. Suddenly, the translator beeped with success. Text appeared on Hyunwoo's screen, and when he read it aloud, his voice was barely a whisper. "UES Vengeance." The three Corvani stared at the ancient text in stunned silence. This wasn't just a building or some piece of primitive technology. This was a ship, a warship, and despite being buried under centuries of ocean sediment, it looked ready to sail again. Tai Ho was the youngest member of their research team, barely out of the academy and eager to prove himself on his first deep, space archaeological mission. He had volunteered to take the more dangerous assignment of getting close to the mysterious vessel, piloting a smaller scout craft that could maneuver right up against the hull. "I'm seeing what looks like some kind of access panel here," Tai Ho reported through his communication system, his voice filled with the excitement of discovery. "The metal around it is different. It has a softer glow, almost like it's meant to be touched." Captain Sujin watched nervously from the main craft as the young researcher positioned his scanner directly over the strange panel. "Be careful, Tai Ho. We don't know what kind of security systems these people might have built into their ships." But Tai Ho was too excited to be cautious. This was his chance to make a real contribution to the expedition, to find something that would make the senior researchers take notice of his work. He pressed his scanning equipment directly against what appeared to be some kind of interface port, trying to get detailed readings of the internal structure. For a moment, absolutely nothing happened. The scanner hummed quietly as it tried to penetrate the strange metal, and Tai Ho began to think the panel was just decorative. He was about to pull back and try a different approach when his equipment suddenly chirped with an unexpected connection tone. "That's strange," he muttered, looking at his readouts. "My scanner is showing some kind of active connection. But that's impossible. This ship has been dead for centuries." Deep inside the massive vessel, systems that had been dormant for longer than the Corvani civilization had existed began to respond to the external stimulus. Circuit pathways that had been waiting in perfect hibernation started to carry power again. Quantum processors designed by human engineers centuries ago began their startup sequences with mechanical precision. The first sign that something was terribly wrong came as a low, deep sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't quite a sound that could be heard with ears. It was more like a vibration that traveled through the water and into the bones of every living thing nearby. "What is that?" Jimin gasped, her hands flying to her ears even though the sound wasn't really coming through her ears at all, so the vibration seemed to resonate in her chest, making her feel like her hearts were beating out of rhythm. Hyunwoo grabbed the controls of their main craft as the strange humming grew stronger. "Tai Ho, get away from that panel right now. Something is happening." But it was too late. All along the massive hull of the ancient vessel, lights began to flicker to life. At first, they were just small pinpricks of blue and white, but quickly they grew brighter and more numerous. Emergency lighting systems that had been waiting for centuries suddenly illuminated sections of the ship that had been hidden in darkness. The new light revealed more text along the hull, much larger and more prominent than what they had seen before. Jimin's translation computer worked frantically to decode the symbols, and when the results appeared on her screen, she felt her blood turn cold. "Terra Protection Fleet, Dreadnought Class." She read aloud, her voice barely a whisper. "Captain." Sujin felt both her heart skip beats as the implications hit her. This wasn't just any ship. This was a warship, and not just any warship, but something called a dreadnought, which even in their language meant something built for massive destruction. Inside the awakening vessel, artificial intelligence systems, older than any technology the Corvani had ever encountered, were running through their activation protocols. The ship's main AI, which had been given the designation Athena by its human creators, began processing information with the speed and efficiency that had made it one of humanity's most advanced tactical systems. Athena's first priority was to assess the current situation. Her sensors detected multiple unknown vessels in the immediate area, vessels that were definitely not human in origin. Her extensive databases contained no record of ships matching these energy signatures or hull configurations. "Captain," Jimin's voice was cracking with fear as she watched her instrument panels. "The electromagnetic readings are going completely off the charts. Whatever is inside that ship, it's drawing massive amounts of power. My equipment can barely handle the interference." The water around the ancient vessel began to change. What had been cold and still for centuries now carried currents of energy that made the Corvani feel like they were swimming in an electrical storm. Their diving craft systems began to fluctuate, as powerful electromagnetic fields washed over them in waves. Tejo tried desperately to disconnect his scanner from the access panel, but the connection seemed to have become permanent. "I can't break the link," he reported frantically. "Something is holding my equipment in place." Captain Sujin realized with growing horror that they were no longer just archaeologists studying ancient ruins. They had awakened something that had been sleeping for centuries, something that had been designed and built for war by a species they had thought was primitive and extinct. The massive ship was coming to life around them, and they had no idea what its intentions might be. The first thing that terrified the Corvani research team was the heat. The water around the massive vessel, which had been ice cold at these crushing depths, suddenly began to warm up rapidly. Steam bubbles started rising from various points along the ship's hull as internal systems that had been dormant for centuries began drawing enormous amounts of power. "The water temperature is rising fast," Jimin reported, her voice tight with panic as she watched her instruments. "It's gone up 15 degrees in the last 30 seconds. At this rate, we'll be cooked alive in our own diving suits." But the heat was just the beginning of their problems. As more sections of the ancient warship came online, automated systems began scanning the area around them. The Corvani could feel invisible beams of energy washing over their small craft, probing and analyzing every detail of their vessels. Hyun-woo watched in fascination and growing terror as mechanical systems along the ship's hull began to move. Panels that had appeared to be simple armor plating suddenly shifted and reconfigured, revealing openings that had been perfectly hidden moments before. From these openings, sleek metallic objects began to emerge, objects that could only be weapons. "Those are gun barrels," he whispered, unable to believe what he was seeing. "Weapon systems. And they're all pointing at us." The targeting was impossibly precise. Every weapon that emerged from the ship's hull swiveled to track the movement of the Corvani vessels with mechanical accuracy that made it clear they were being hunted by something far more advanced than anything their civilization had ever built. "We need to leave now," Hyun-woo shouted, reaching for the engine controls of their main craft. "Full power to engines. Emergency ascent." But when he activated the engines, nothing happened. The craft shuddered and strained, but they remained exactly where they were, as if some invisible hand was holding them in place. The engine readings showed maximum power output, but they weren't moving even a single meter. "We're caught in some kind of containment field," Captain Sujin realized with growing horror. "The ship isn't just tracking us, it's trapped us here." Tejo, still connected to the ship's access panel in his smaller scout craft, began reporting increasingly disturbing observations. "The connection is getting stronger," he said, his voice shaking. "I can feel something probing my equipment, like it's trying to learn about our technology." Through the viewports of their diving craft, the team watched in terrified fascination as more sections of the ship's hull began to transform. What they had initially thought was a single, solid piece of metal was actually composed of thousands of smaller panels that could move and reconfigure themselves. The ship was literally reshaping itself before their eyes. New weapon ports opened along the hull, each one larger and more menacing than the last. Some revealed energy projectors that glowed with an ominous blue light, while others showed the dark mouths of what appeared to be projectile weapons. The message was clear. This ship had been built to destroy enemies, and it had enough firepower to level entire cities. But the most terrifying aspect wasn't the raw destructive power they could see building within the war machine. It was the intelligence behind it all. This wasn't some automated defense system or ancient booby trap responding to their presence. Something was actively analyzing them, making decisions about what to do with them. The proof came when Captain Sujin's communication array suddenly activated on its own. She hadn't touched any controls, but her equipment began transmitting data at an incredible rate. All of their research files, their star charts, their personnel records, everything was being copied and sent directly to the awakened ship. "It's downloading our entire database," she said in amazement and terror. Our language files, our cultural records, everything we know about our civilization, it's learning about us. Jimin watched her instruments in fascination as the data transfer continued. The processing speed is incredible. It's analyzing information faster than our best computers can even display it. Whatever intelligence is running that ship, it's far beyond anything we've ever encountered. The water around them continued to heat up as more systems came online within the massive vessel. Emergency lights along the hull grew brighter, and new sections of the ship began to glow with internal power. The Corvani could hear sounds now, mechanical noises that traveled through the water, sounds of machinery that had been sleeping for centuries, suddenly roaring back to life. Look at the hull plating, Hyunwoo pointed out with growing dread. It's not just reconfiguring, it's repairing itself. Sections that looked damaged are becoming perfect again. They watched as the ship's self-repair systems began working on areas where centuries of ocean pressure had caused minor damage. Microscopic robots, invisible to the naked eye, crawled across the hull like a living skin, fixing every imperfection and returning the vessel to its original pristine condition. The message was becoming clear to all of them. This wasn't just a ship that had awakened. It was a predator that was preparing itself for battle, and they were completely at its mercy, trapped in the crushing depths of an alien ocean with nowhere to run and no way to escape. The ancient human warship was deciding what to do with them, and they could only wait in terror for its judgment. Deep within the massive warship, Athena continued her analysis of the strange vessels that had disturbed her centuries-long sleep. Her quantum processors worked at speeds that would have been incomprehensible to the Corvani, examining every detail of their craft, their technology, and the biological signatures she detected within. The results were puzzling. These beings were definitely alive and intelligent. Their brain patterns showed complex thought processes and emotional responses that indicated advanced consciousness. But they were completely unknown to her vast databases. In all her memories of humanity's encounters across the galaxy, she had never encountered a species quite like this one. More concerning was what they had been doing before awakening her. Her external sensors had recorded everything, how they had carefully excavated her resting place, how they had been scanning her hull for weaknesses, how one of them had actually interfaced with her systems. In her tactical assessment protocols, these actions could only be interpreted as reconnaissance for a potential attack. But Athena was more than just a weapon system. She had been designed by humanity's finest minds to be capable of diplomacy, as well as destruction. Her creators had understood that sometimes the best way to protect human interests was through communication rather than violence. Her first attempt at contact was simple and universal, mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should be able to recognize. She transmitted the Fibonacci sequence, followed by prime numbers, then basic geometric relationships. These were concepts that should be understood by any civilization advanced enough to build spacecraft. The response from the alien vessels was immediate and encouraging. They transmitted back the same sequences, proving they understood the mathematical concepts. More importantly, Athena's sensors detected that they were running the mathematical patterns through some kind of translation software, trying to decode deeper meaning from the numbers. Realizing these beings had translation technology, Athena quickly adapted her approach. She began monitoring their communications with each other, analyzing their language patterns and vocal structures. Within seconds, she had mapped enough of their linguistic system to attempt basic communication. When Athena's first real message reached the Corvani vessels, it came through their communication systems with a clarity that made it obvious this was no accidental signal. The voice was artificial but somehow conveying immense authority and power. Unknown entities, state purpose, human assets under protection protocol, comply or withdraw. For the three Corvani researchers, hearing a direct communication from the awakened ship was simultaneously the best and worst thing that could have happened. On one hand, it meant the intelligence controlling the vessel was willing to talk, rather than simply destroying them. On the other hand, the message made it clear they were dealing with something that considered them potential threats. Dr. Hyunwoo felt his hands shaking as he realized the implications of what they had just heard. Human assets under protection protocol, he repeated quietly. That means this ship belongs to the species we thought was extinct. And it thinks its job is to protect them. Captain Sujin took a deep breath, knowing that their next words might determine whether they lived or died. She activated their communication system and began composing what might be the most important message of her life. "Unknown vessel," she began, trying to keep her voice steady despite her terror. "We are researchers from the Corvani Federation. We came to this system to study archaeological remains. We meant no harm to you or your creators." The response came immediately, as if the ship's intelligence had been analyzing every word as she spoke. "Corvani Federation unknown to Terra databases. Explain archaeological activities. Explain breach attempts of ship systems." Jimin quickly began transmitting their research data, not the sensitive information the ship had already stolen, but their official mission parameters and archaeological findings. "We study the history of civilizations," she explained. "We catalog and preserve knowledge of species and cultures throughout the galaxy. We found evidence of your people on this world and came to learn about them." "Your people," Hyunwoo added. "Carefully. We believed they were gone. Extinct. We found only ruins on the surface, abandoned cities. We thought we were studying the remains of a dead civilization." There was a long pause after their transmission. The Corvani could feel the massive ship's sensors continuing to scan them, could sense the incredible intelligence behind those scans, processing every word they had spoken. The weapons systems remained locked onto their position, ready to fire at a moment's notice. "We study the past to understand," Captain Sujin added, hoping to appeal to whatever sense of reason the artificial intelligence might possess. "Knowledge and understanding, not conquest or destruction. We archive the stories of those who came before so their achievements won't be forgotten." The silence that followed their explanation stretched for long, agonizing minutes. The three, Corvani, sat in their diving craft, hundreds of meters below the surface of an alien ocean, completely at the mercy of a war machine that had been built by a species they now realized might not be extinct after all. Athena was processing their words, comparing them against her threat assessment protocols, trying to determine if these strange beings were telling the truth or if this was some elaborate deception designed to lower her defenses. The fate of the research team hung in the balance while an artificial mind older than their civilization decided whether they deserved to live or die. Athena processed the Corvani explanation with the kind of thoroughness that had made her one of humanity's most sophisticated artificial intelligences. Every word the aliens had spoken was analyzed not just for meaning, but for emotional content, stress patterns, and consistency with their previous statements. Her lie detection algorithms found no deception in their communications. More troubling was what her internal systems were telling her about the passage of time. Her chronometers, which had continued running even during her long hibernation, showed that she had been offline for exactly 412 years, 7 months, and 16 days. Over 4 centuries had passed since she had last received orders from Terra Command. Athena immediately attempted to establish contact with human command authority. Her quantum entanglement communicators, which should have been able to reach across vast distances instantaneously, transmitted urgent status reports into the void. She sent identification codes, situation updates, and requests for new orders. The response was absolute silence. She tried again, this time broadcasting on every frequency that human forces had ever used. Emergency channels, military command networks, civilian communication systems. All of them remained completely quiet. Not even background chatter or automated signals reached her sensors. The implications were staggering. Either humanity had moved so far away that even her advanced communication systems couldn't reach them, or something terrible had happened to the civilization she had been built to protect. Athena began a deeper analysis of the local stellar region. Her sensors, now fully active, swept across nearby star systems looking for any signs of human presence. The results were disturbing. Star systems that should have contained thriving human colonies showed no electromagnetic signatures consistent with advanced civilization. Space lanes that should have been busy with human shipping traffic were empty and silent. The Corvani researchers, still trapped in their diving craft, watched with growing amazement as the hostile energy signatures surrounding the massive warship suddenly began to diminish. The water around them stopped heating up, and the weapon systems that had been tracking their every movement slowly powered down. Something's changed, Jimin observed, hardly daring to believe their instruments. The electromagnetic readings are dropping. It's like the ship is standing down from combat alert. Athena's next communication carried a weight of loss and determination that the Corvani could feel even through their translation systems. Terra command non-responsive. Human colony status unknown. Initiating long-range reconnaissance protocol. Captain. Sujin felt a chill run through her as she realized what those words meant. This artificial intelligence had just discovered that its creators might be gone, scattered, or worse. After sleeping for over 4 centuries, it had awakened to find itself possibly alone in the galaxy. But Athena was not programmed to despair. She was programmed to adapt and continue her mission. If Terra Command was silent, then she would operate independently. If human colonies were dark, then she would find them or find out what had happened to them. The Corvani felt their diving craft suddenly lurch as the invisible force that had been holding them in place was released. Their engines, which had been straining uselessly against the containment field, suddenly had freedom to move again. "We're free," Hyunwoo said in amazement. "The ship is letting us go." But they quickly realized that being released was the least remarkable thing happening around them. The massive hull of the ancient warship was beginning to move. After centuries of lying motionless on the ocean floor, the Vengeance was rising. Sediment that had accumulated over the vessel for hundreds of years began cascading off its hull like an avalanche in reverse. Centuries of ocean floor debris created enormous clouds in the water as the kilometer-long dreadnought began its ascent toward the surface. Jimin could only watch in awe as the ship's massive bulk passed by their small craft. The scale was overwhelming. Their entire research vessel could have fit inside one of the ship's weapon bays. The hull stretched out of sight in both directions, a moving mountain of metal and technology that defied comprehension. "Look at the power systems," Taeho whispered from his scout craft. "Everything is coming online. This isn't just a ship awakening, it's a ship preparing for a long journey." The water around them began to glow as the Vengeance's main engines started their initialization sequence. Fusion reactors that had been dormant for centuries roared back to life, providing power levels that the Corvani could barely measure with their equipment. As the massive warship breached the surface of the alien ocean, it created waves that could be felt even at the depths where the research team remained. The twin suns of the system reflected off the ship's pristine hull, creating a sight that would remain burned into the memories of the 3 Corvani for the rest of their lives. Athena's final transmission reached them as her faster-than-light drive systems began their startup sequence. Research vessel crew. Terra Protection Fleet extends gratitude for awakening protocol. Maintain safe distance. Humanity's guardian returns to duty. The words carried both thanks and warning. The artificial intelligence was grateful that the Corvani had accidentally awakened her, but she was also making it clear that her primary loyalty remained with humanity. As the Vengeance's FTL drives engaged and the massive ship vanished into the depths of space, Captain Sujin realized that their archaeological expedition had just changed the course of galactic history. Somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, humanity's lost guardian was beginning its search for home, and the galaxy was about to learn that Earth's children had built their protectors very, very well indeed.